Are you guys ready? I think the gavel did announce, right? Good morning and welcome to the committee meeting of the whole, our first meeting of 2026. So we are very excited to get some new projects on the ground and get some planning. So thank you for participating in this today. Do we have anything we want to go over before the meeting itself? Commissioner Berry? Commissioner May? Okay. Commissioner Stroberger was laid over on a flight, so he is making his way back. So hopefully he'll be able to join us for the tail end. Debbie Bowers, are you ready for the presentation? Oh, the pledge. I'm sorry. Yes, yes. Thank you, Commissioner Kohler.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Kohler, and if you'll lead us in the pledge again tonight, that would be great. And has our meeting been properly advertised?
Madam Chair, this meeting was advertised in the Pensacola News Journal and the board's weekly meeting schedule on December 31st, 2025.
Wonderful. And just as a community service announcement, you can sign up to receive those notifications on the county website. So no, we've received some complaints that we only advertise in P&J. We can email those directly to you. So if that is something that interests you or some of your friends, please visit myescambia.com.
Sorry, technical difficulty. It's not showing. Wait, it's not showing up here. I need to.
Will you switch on the microphone? I'm sorry. Thank you.
So I'm going to tag team with Chris Pate from Florida West. I'm going to just go over the initial, laying it out, and then he'll talk about the economic development opportunities. I just want to give you a little bit of a brief history, just to remind you that this site, or part of the whole site, was Escambia Treating Company, and they operated from 1942 to 1982. They did pressurized treating, mainly utility poles and foundation pilings. They caused a lot of contamination with PCPs and creosote. EPA, after CERCLA was passed, started monitoring them in the mid-'80s. Around 1992, EPA completed the first soil removal project. They relocated just a little bit under 400 households in 4 different residential areas. And just a little bit, when the EPA through FDEP deeded all the property to Escambia County in 2018. And I just wanted to make sure everybody understood there were restrictions, there's restricted covenants on the deed. It can only be used for commercial, industrial, manufacturing, businesses, not even temporary residential, like a hotel and motel can't go on there. Specifically, again, residential, daycare, schools, playgrounds, anything like that that would have someone interacting with the ground or stuff like that cannot be on the property. So the first slide that I want to do is so the rest of the slides are basically aerials. And my mouse isn't working, Mike. But this is the overall area. Damn it. Thank you. Of course, if you don't know. All right, well, hopefully you can kind of follow. I've broken it down in 3 different areas, the north parcels, the south parcels, and the west parcels. The blue line, if you can see it, is the delineation between the county and the city, and it's jagged. You'll see the blue line, and on the big parcel on the north parcel, it's on the, it goes down, I think it's not Spring Street. I am sorry the slides are so bad. I had a problem with them. I just wanted you to see that when you get below the industrial complex area with all the warehouses and manufacturing buildings, it juts around and then it comes back to Palafox. So there's one little area that's the county, and then north of the big parcel is the county, and the city has the middle part. Okay, hopefully that made sense. This is a little bit harder without being able to show you. I'm going to start on the south parcels, and I just want to show you that the northern rectangle is already done. It's a stormwater pond. It was part of the Delano project, and it is completed. What I'm showing you in the green is about 7.7 acres that we're asking for direction and allowing that to become the fire training facility. And then you will see on the red parcel, there is, I've just denoted, there has been discussion from EPA and others about donating some land, about an acre to the church. I did try to contact.
Debbie,
Yes,
so
sir.
point of clarification. So one, not all of the property that was acquired was a part of the Superfund site, correct?
Correct. The
So some of, and Chip may help, but there's a large portion of that land that can be used for athletic fields and for other things other than being capped or not.
No, it cannot.
The outlying areas that were not a part of the contamination cannot be used?
Correct. Everything that was deeded to us by EPA, which is all of the parcels I showed here, have restricted covenants on them, and we cannot use it for any kind of camp activity or athletic activity.
Good morning. Debbie is correct. Currently, they do have restrictions on all of the properties. But in conversations with EPA, they have said if we wanted to do additional soil testing in some of the outlying areas that were not part of the contaminated area, that we could do that additional soil testing and possibly lift those restrictive covenants in some of those other areas.
Okay, well, maybe when Keith Wilkins was here, maybe that was the conversation that we had back in 2018, that we could, because there was no contamination that was found on those properties. And then there were multiple properties, maybe 2 or 3 Chips, remember, that were tax deed properties that when EPA donated them, we didn't even have those properties at those times, that we acquired those through tax deed, and there was one that was left out that we didn't get.
That's correct.
And so those were not a part of the donation, so we acquired those after the donation for EPA. And so for the other thing on the presentation, so as we get started, when Senator Nelson did this, I was a young high school student when this first started with Margaret Williams. And it was a commitment from the county, not necessarily EPA, for the residents in that neighborhood, for that church, for Inglewood. And I talked to Gwen Crosby before I came here. It's not an acre, it's 3 acres. And so that's going to be the starting point for anything that, I'm going to be supportive of. But go ahead.
Understood. Then if we go to that's the suggestion from staff on the southern parcels. If we go to the western parcels, if you all recollect, we have a little bit under $30 million to build a new ECAP facility. In green, in the lower half part of the green is where the ECAP facility will go. I apologize. I really had this. The tooth, where it looks like they're missing teeth, are part of the grant also, so we are trying to acquire that, and the grant will pay for that. We are also talking to owners of the parcels on Pace in front of the ECAP facility. They're willing sellers. We're discussing that with them. Also, the parcels between the further and eastern end and the big, huge ECAP facility that's a little bit like a triangle. We're talking to those owners. And we have been having, and they seem to be willing, we're talking to them, and the parcel between the stormwater pond, which is the 2 acres north, in that triangle area, we've been talking to 2 owners in there. So if we come to any kind of agreement with any of those, we'll have to work with Stephen to find a fund to purchase them, but that would just help enhance the ECAP facility. and especially to give it pace frontage. The stormwater pond we will need not only for the area, but obviously for the development of the ECAP facility itself. And then in red, you see a bunch of, it's about 4.3 acres of smaller parcels. We can work with Chris. The county itself can do auctions of any of that. There's several ways that we can sell those or put them back into use. And then we get to the larger parcel. If I had my cursor working, the actual Escambia Treating Company plant was north of that green box and probably right in the road, which is Lansdowne Avenue, but that's where the actual Escambia Treating Company was located and where most of the contamination is. There's about 73.2, you found it?
You just have to look at it.
Okay, so you found the, this is where the Escambia Treating Company was actually located. In total with this, and what's in front of Spares, this is what's just below Tisdale. You have about 73.2 marketable acres. Staff is asking for this 5 acres in green to, for the animal shelter. That's about the minimum number of acres that we can put it on. We are bringing action items in the near future. In the near future to vacate some of the plat portions and rights-of-ways north of Hickory Street and south of Beggs Lane. In that area, we're cleaning it up so it will be better. It will be easier to market it for economic development. And the last note's on there because I've heard a lot of people with a lot of consternation about the cap. You can build on the cap. You just have to do the engineering correctly. It may cost you a little bit more than it would normally cost to build on a flat piece of land. But even in our deed restrictions, our restrictive covenants, it explains how you can work with engineering and build even buildings on it. It's just going to be a little bit more expensive. So unless you have more questions, for my part of the presentation, it was just to try to discuss the fire training facility and the animal shelter.
Can you flip back, I think it was slide number 4, and Commissioner May, if you can give us some clarity on what you would like to see done with these properties. I know it's a project that's really close to your heart, and I want to make sure that we're respectful to the community as we move forward. Can you give us what your vision might be for this area?
That's the church.
Just contiguous, I mean, just for a starting point, I don't know exactly, what it looks like. We've been talking about this for 30 years, but a starting point, Madam Chair, is, the 3 acres that are contiguous to the church, that was for a community center or expansion of the church is what I know was promised to the church, and so that's, for me, is the starting point.
So are you looking at giving it to the church, or are you looking at putting a community center on there?
I'm not giving it to the church, which was promised to them.
Okay, how does that work legally? Like, are we able to just donate?
Yeah. We donate property all the time.
To donate to a nonprofit, you would need the nonprofit to serve a public purpose, which should be defined pretty broadly, but it would need to be for some function that's open to the public, that serves a function that we believe serves a public purpose. It can be sold or donated or leased. It can be sold or leased to the highest bidder. It can be sold or leased to the highest bidder with restrictions, or it could be donated for either A, economic development purposes, or B, for a public purpose to a legitimate nonprofit. Those are your options.
Okay, that makes sense. And then just to fill me in, since I am the newbie, where are we at with the communication with the church?
So we had looked at doing all of this about 1.5 years ago, and I had talked to the wife of one of the deacons, but I left phone messages for a deacon and an elder, and I never got phone calls back. So
Well, you don't need to get a phone call back because I represent that district and I represent them. And simply, they came down, the whole church, in 2018, and we said before we develop this, we're going to give it to the church. This is nothing new. It's been ongoing for 30-plus years, and it's not been a discussion. So just we've not moved to donate it to the church because we've not developed it at this point. So there was no need to do it until we came up with a master plan.
Okay, so do you have a main point of contact that Debbie can work with at the church, or what does that, because we can't just, we have to have a main point of contact at the nonprofit, right?
Commissioner May, if you'd like to run front door, I'd be happy to work with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, the people have been down here to at least 10 meetings. So, I mean, I'm not going to go around into hoops about point of contact. The church has been there for 150 years. Yeah, it's a lot of contacts at the church. I mean, we know what's right. Anybody that worked here, Chip knows, Keith knows, and Allison knows, and anybody that's here. Commissioner Berry was on the board.
Right. I
and
just want to
it's
make sure there's a
non-starter.
path to get there, to
Yeah,
do the
okay.
right thing, like you're saying. So that makes sense. So with that, your vision would be to take the bottom 4 acres out of play? Which would mean we would need additional space for the fire training facility, is that correct?
And Commissioner Berry, just so you remember, one of the only reasons we held up on the 3 acres was because Gilmore was trying to get that property at the time. And so it was a long, hours and hours of conversation in which Gilmore was trying to do expansion, and we did not do the expansion with Gilmore because we had already made that commitment to the church, if you can recall.
Yeah, I actually owned the property that butted up to it, and we were trying to get it at one point
Okay,
because we
well,
had
you know.
such a problem with homeless people. They were actually tapping into our electrical and running it over to their homeless camp.
Right.
And then they called our building on fire.
Oh, yeah.
So,
There's a lot of homeless in there on the oldest
Yeah.
Camion, yeah, so we do need to redevelop it, so, and maybe your company was one of those. I know that Emerald Coast Granite, as well as Gilmore was trying to get it as well.
so with that, if that's not a viable option, if we move that direction, what would be another viable option for the training facility?
I still think that we have enough land there that we can work with, and we will try to talk to the families that own these homes right here, and try to work with them in buying that property too. See
So
if they're
that-
willing.
That would cut it down from because they were asking for 16 acres, and then we got them down to, it looks like around 8, and so that would cut it in half again.
Not in half, but it will take out
25%.
so. We'll be down to 4.7, but
Yeah, I mean, I
we
don't-
don't really have any other location right now that we could put them
Yeah,
on.
and I don't know that, I don't know that, to me, that's not as big a priority as other things on the property, you know?
The training center?
Well, so that's a good point. If we don't, do we want to put a training facility there? Or do we want to look for a different location for the training facility and then work with Florida West on
I
developing
think
this?
I know one of the issues that we've had, a lot of discussions about recently are budgetary issues, and there's a ton of money going that direction already, and I don't know that that's a standing high priority for myself. So, that's why the facility is moved around a few different times. And if we have other uses for this property, I think that's a higher priority.
Madam Chair, if I can ask 2 questions. One is for Commissioner May and Debbie. I know Commissioner May, I wasn't here, so I'm assuming the 3 acres is what you're saying is factual.
I don't even care.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
We're going to have to change this diagram so do you have another diagram for what Commissioner May wants if we do 3 acres and it meets the public purpose, or? Because, where are you thinking, going into the fire training center? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I think what we could do is go across here, but we'd have to work out some engineering on this road, Pearl Avenue, because it's used for the 18-wheelers coming underneath Fairfield. We do think that there might be an opportunity to come back here and hook those 18-wheelers into this street.
Okay.
It's total
So
52,
there's-
how many
there's
acres is
ways
it
to-
total? Debbie, how many acres is it total?
8.7.
No, the whole, and not just the whole Midtown Conference, not just the Superfund. So how many acres do we have? 50 plus total in that area? How many acres do we have
You mean for
total?
all of it? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well over 100.
So we don't have an acreage problem. We have a location problem, and I've been consistent with this. I'm not going to support anything that's all Avalon exempt, whether it's municipal or whether it's an E-date, because that's part of the problem with this whole neighborhood that was depressed. This is the 3rd largest relocation in the history of the United States. It displaced more African Americans than any other piece of property, including Wedgewood, in the history probably of the state of Florida. And there were a lot of promises that were made to that community. And so how do we redevelop that CRA? How do we provide for the infrastructure, the lights, the sidewalks, and things that are adjacent to that community? It's only if we increase the capacity of that CRA or tax base in that community. So obviously we got to bring businesses in here. We have to increase the CRA and bring money in here. So if we just put a whole bunch of county facilities and tax abatement properties in here, the residents, as you go to Pace Boulevard, as you go into the Palafox CRA, those people are still going to be left out. You have to understand that adjacent to all of this land were people who were not able to move that are still suffering with flooding, sidewalks, and a depressed neighborhood. So whatever this does, it has to affect the entire community, and so we have to figure all of that out. So, and actually, to give you an answer, what I want to see, it's a little more thought than just a layout. It's all the other implication that's going to directly affect that neighborhood. And, you know, I'm not going to say what my ideas are without participation of the residents that live in that neighborhood. I mean, if we're going to pay the people and outline Phil 8, and their residents have a whole lot to say about what happens there, well, people are going to have a whole lot to say about what happens in their neighborhood as well.
So what neighborhoods are this? Because that's mostly an industrial area
It's-
right there. So what are your connecting
Well, there are a
neighborhoods?
lot there. You're right. That's the problem. It's a lot of residential connected to industrial. It's all messed up because the zoning was so horrible because it was a poor neighborhood. So people put mechanic shops, HVAC system at the same time. You got Miss Bowling living in a house there. So, I mean, that CRA is just a mess. And so, quite frankly, the CRA plan should be a part of this whole conversation of what we do and how we redevelop this.
Do you happen to have a map with a CRA overlay on that?
No, I don't.
Well, it's the city and the county, I think. Yeah, it overlaps both the city and the county.
I will-
If
And
I
we
can go to my
acquired the
second
city's plan,
question
didn't we?
When we get a second.
I'm sorry, Mike, let me, didn't we acquire the property chips from the city? Did we get the city's part? Didn't it roll into the county? Because at one time, the city was trying to develop it. I know the mayor does have some ideas of some things he discussed with me yesterday.
Yes, Commissioner's gone up and back a few times.
A lot of time.
Yeah. Currently, as Debbie showed, the boundary that exists today, where the city and the county boundary is. But it was different 10 years ago.
Thanks. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I just, and that's all good conversation, because I know I have some of the same issues you do in some of these areas, Commissioner May. Debbie, I know you probably, can I have Chief Harrison come up for a second? Because I want to talk about the fire training site, just for, I have a couple questions. Chief Harrison, do you mind coming up just for a quick second? So my concern, I'm for the fire training side, I think, but I also agree with Commissioner Berry, depending on where the board wants to go on all these cuts, we're going to kind of be in a pickle on where we spend our money. The fire training site the city has over on Garden,
Yes, sir.
why isn't there a joint effort on training sites between the county and the city? Is there a good reason why we don't do that?
We do have a joint training center. In other words, they allow us on their property.
Will this site augment, I mean, is it going to be much more enhanced if we develop it?
Absolutely.
And
It'll be
are they
much-
going to contribute and get rid of that site, or what's going
They'll
to happen
probably
there?
keep their own. Currently, that specific site in the city is the only one that's state certified to teach programs. And so we have to share the scheduling with George Stone's Fire Academy, us running our fire academy, and the city for their use. And sometimes those don't always match up exactly perfect, so one group or the other is having to coordinate the times, trying to make it best fit in there. This particular training facility we're looking for will be much more enhanced than what the city has. The city is on a very small acreage plot right there. We're looking to have an EVOC place put in, special operations, hazmat, so on and so forth. The city doesn't have those functions, and those would enhance our
And
department.
just for clarification, will most of the funding of this come out of the fire assessment?
I think it's going to come out of LOST, but that would be a Stefan question.
And
Okay.
we have $1 million from Michelle Salzman as well,
That's correct. Yes, we've had a grant from Michelle Salzman for about 2 years now, and that's something that we're looking to spend.
What's the total cost again?
For the whole facility? Right now, I believe we have $3 million set aside. That was not including anything that may have been mentioned for the building of the new fire stations.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that input.
Is there a use it or lose it with that $1 million? I don't know how state funding works when it comes to that.
Yes, it's something that they would like us to see move forward, maybe a little bit faster. I don't want to say that there's necessarily a timeline, but again, we've been sitting on it for a couple years now, and we've had a couple emails saying, hey, any progress at this point? And so we keep them filled in, but
Okay.
Madam Chair, one follow-up question. So if this site gets developed, would you get it state certified?
that is absolutely correct.
Is it normal to have 2 state certified fire training centers within that close of proximity?
It is, the city obviously operates in a 26 square miles, and we have 656 square miles that we operate in, so we have a lot more need to bring in our fire stations into a facility, and it's more centrally located for us than the one down in the city, as far as trying to pull northern, central, and southern units in, so that's really what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
And I think Commissioner May is right. One of the things we have to look at is revenue-generating properties.
Sure.
Is there a world in which we're training students from other municipalities or that we're saving money on training? What does the ROI for a facility like that look
Sure.
like?
And obviously, this would be downrange a little bit, but there is an opportunity to where we can charge other students for coming in through the academy. There's all sorts of classes that are put on through the Florida State Fire College, but by becoming a training facility, we'd have the opportunity to train, teach, and/or, in this case we're talking about right now, charge people to come in for those programs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So is there any, if this is going to be wherever this lands or wherever it's put, will the city participate in costs, or have we had any discussion with them?
I haven't had any discussion with them as far as cost. We have had discussions as far as joint training and the facility being larger and able to have all those units come in and train together. There has been discussion, but as far as a cost, no, there has not.
So it's been a discussion with the city that they would participate in the cost?
No discussion as far as them participating with a cost, but participating in training and stuff like that.
Oh, so they would pay to train, or would they utilize it
Well,
for?
My envision would be they've been very upfront and good partners with us in the past. They've allowed us to use that training facility at no cost. So my initial reaction would be reciprocity to a certain deal and allow them to train with us. And it only benefits us in the long run, the more we build the relationship with each other. So I think it's a positive for both.
And we've just outgrown the training facility that they have at this time?
Right. It's a scheduling process. We have to go with them to try and schedule it. They've been great partners so far, but the more the demand, the harder it is for us to get in there. And it certainly is not something that we can build upon. In other words, we don't want to spend at least I wouldn't want to expend an exorbitant amount of money putting in a bunch of training props that we have to schedule around and not be ours.
And so what would be like the economic impact if you were where would that, so do we charge anybody to train now? Is there
No, sir.
a call center for it? No,
sir.
Oh.
And, the sky's the limit, kind of depends on where you want to go. We can bring conferences in. That can also bring money in. It could bring people in from different areas of town or the country to have conferences there. And once again, the sky's the limit depending on where you'd like to go.
Okay.
So your firefighters who are like going to school to be a firefighter, where are they attending school, the majority of them right now?
So, and that's, if you'd like to call it, or I would like to call it an issue, is a lot of times for classroom stuff, they're working out of the Osceola Fire Station, and then for training, they have to leave that station and go down to the city on the scheduled days that we work out with the city. And this training facility that I would like to see move forward, we would have actually a training classroom facility there and the training grounds directly on site.
So if you have like a high schooler that goes to school in Crestview and they're like, hey, I want to be a firefighter, they could essentially pay to go to school at this training academy?
Correct.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
So, and you probably were not here, and Commissioner Barry, maybe help me. We talked about a training center on the north end. Whatever happened to putting that training center up on the north end in District 5?
So the issue arose is that training center where it was located there's wellheads directly underneath it for the Gonzales water utilities that are in that area. And with the drainage sites and where they would be placed, there was a concern that would not be the best option. So we started looking for other places.
So are there any environmental concerns, being that this is a Superfund site on this area? Do we have any environmental concerns?
I do not. It's going to be your typical apparatus that you would see driving in, much like you would see on a road in any area in town. We don't plan on using PFAS. I don't know if that's where you're going with this, Commissioner, but there is no intention to use that product there.
No, I'm pretty clear where I go. No, that was nothing implied. I think I'm going to just say everything I want to say, but yeah, that's great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
And what, because I don't want to slim down the training facility so much that it's not worth our money, and I don't. Right, so we want to wait and make the best investment possible.
Absolutely.
Is 4 acres enough, 8 acres enough? Like, what does that look like? To be big enough to make an impact, but not like your best plan possible?
obviously the bigger the better, but also having the objective to meet everybody else's ideas and where it should be. I think holistically around the 10-acre mark, give or take an acre or two, may work for us. But the idea is to have also, like I discussed earlier, is the EVOC class, where that gives us enough room to turn apparatus around. There'll be 2 different burn buildings on the original plans that we had submitted, so having room to move the apparatus on that site would be beneficial for that type of acreage.
Okay, and if we don't go in here, is there room in the north end or somewhere else that you could identify that might be a good option?
We looked at a couple different things that are out there. There was some property on Olive Road that we looked at, but it would have to be more discussion with staff.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chief.
So with that, I just wanted to lay out the lay of the land and where we were on some of the things that we've been discussing and working on with Commissioner May. And I'll turn it over to Chris Pate to talk about economic development opportunities that.
So Debbie, one question before Chris comes. So in 2001, 2002, there was a conceptual plan with neighborhood input that they had, and also UWF did a economic analysis impact study. Did you take any of that input into consideration as we laying this out? The ones that they did back then?
So the only thing I have, and I didn't know what year it was done, is this Palafox Commerce Park that was done by the Haas Center.
Yeah, that's the impact study.
Is that it?
That's the impact study, but it was there were conceptual drawings with the vision of what this whole thing could be that was done
Yeah,
in 2001.
there's one in here, yes.
Is it one in there? Okay, that's fine. Just as long as that was, because that was some input from the neighbors. Frankly, many of them are dead. And so, Steve, I don't know if you remember that Margaret Williams' daughter showed up about the legacy of her mom at that board meeting and was very passionate about the sacrifice that she had in her life. And I'll just tell you, Mary McWayne, whose father, because there are so many African Americans died of the same lung problem, the same cancer problem. His funeral is this weekend that I'll be in attendance. We had a lot of detail about the meetings that we had at New Hope Church in the input. And so I just want to make sure we capture and keep the intent and the spirit of those residents, even though many of them have passed on, because this is sort of their legacy. So if we can just make sure that that's in, I don't know if you did, but as we move forward, I want to make sure that it's included.
Okay.
So did you overlay some of those ideas with this layout? Like, does the layout that you provided us capture the spirit of that?
Well, we're taking some of it out for county purposes, but yes, I think that when you look at a little bit like LF8, it has boulevards in there, it had trees and stuff, so it would still look like a good commerce park. It probably dealt with smaller units than what we have been talking about recently. Office complexes, smaller manufacturing, probably look a little bit like but prettier and cleaner is what. And I will get a copy of this to all of you, but it has the smaller buildings kind of like that. And I know at one time we were talking to someone that was going to take this whole parcel and do a smaller manufacturing plant. So the spirit of what the neighbors had given to the Haas Center was more of a complex.
Okay, that makes sense. And then Commissioner May and Allison, can you help me out with this? When it comes to naming any facilities that the county owns on there, that's something that Commissioner May could carry that legacy through on with the naming rights?
We do have actually a policy that addresses naming of facilities, so we would apply that.
Okay, and would that be, so that would be the animal shelter, what other ECAT?
Yeah,
Okay, and is there any other county facilities? I know possibly the training facility.
correct, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much.
And so, Madam Chair, just for, just a little information, because you were new, there's been a lot of discussion. I mean, we went for years with Scott Luth and Blue Wind Turbines with GE, had a lot of discussion with Dave Roball and recycling, with waste management, with the new thing that he's done. And we've always just tried to make sure that, it's something that improves the neighborhood. So, I mean, I think we're open to everything, but I just want to make sure we have the full discussion, because candidly, this project has sat probably on the shelf way too long. And it's really when we talk about Baptist Hospital, it's pale in comparison to the amount of land and the economic impact that we can bring, with 100+ acres. Hey, Chris.
Hello, sir. How are you guys? Well, I appreciate being included today and talking about this area. Our focus would be more on the northern end of the site. That was truly the industrial piece. Escambia, we do not have enough adequate economic development product right now, and we're working very hard on trying to change that, whether that's at Central Commerce Park or the Bluffs. And so that'll open up additional properties. So we need a variety of product, and that's, again, buildings and land that is prepared for economic development. The outlying fields project and Tech Park, obviously, because of the price point, is going to have a different target than, say, Central Commerce, Midtown, in like Ellison. So most of the projects are going to fit within what Midtown would be more applicable for. And so, it's that precision manufacturing, some warehousing space to kind of suit the needs of a supply chain to help those manufacturers. The land that we would focus on primarily would be the land that's not capped, that to the north. So it's a smaller piece, roughly 40 acres or so when you look at all the parcels together, as well as working with our private ownership to the north and trying to make that a little bit bigger so that we can incorporate, not just the parcels to the south and all the land in there. 40 acres is hard to sell, without our master plan, and try to maximize the utilization of that site. So working with our private friends to the north, Collier Merrill and some of the others, that we can look to really maximize and get about 100 acres of economic development focused land. And so we've talked to Collier about that, as well as we have one existing industry that's been on the hook for a while to expand there, as well as a private developer that would also help us with 2 existing industries expand. So we have some immediate projects that are sort of there, but we still need to master plan that a little bit to make sure the right-of-ways, the infrastructure are all there in the right place, so we don't have remnants of land just waiting. So we want to maximize every piece of dirt that's there. So again, we're just really focused on that northern end. And then as we look to develop that, we'll do more research on the capped area to understand what the foundation requirements are, because shallow foundations are a little bit harder for manufacturing to deal with based on vibrations of machines, those kind of things. So, but we'll work to that and then find proper users for the capped area as well.
And I know when you and I had talked, we had had a conversation about how to avoid people coming to the podium, trying to buy the property and us auctioning it off style. What is your best solution, and what have you done in other places where you've done economic development to kind of keep those things under wraps and to keep it a more smooth process for the buyer and the investor?
Yeah, one thing that we could do is have an option set up that would have a time limit for that with PEDC, and where they would basically have the price set so the money that would come back to the county per acre, and then we could look at that and then basically flip those pieces of options right to the company or to a developer that may be leasing the property to the company to build a building on, whatever. So that option scenario is something that we could easily work out.
Can you walk us through what a timeline looks like for something of that nature? So if we were to say, hey, you've got 2 years to sell it, this is what we want per acre.
Yep.
What does that look like as far as your collaboration with us and then taking it back to the buyer?
Fairly quick. We want to make sure the appraisals are accurate, and so we want to look at that, and then look at the breakdown of the land. So because part of that laying out the property is a component of that. We're doing that with Central Commerce Park now, so we have a current survey, or a current appraisal, as well as now laying out those parcels. So that's taken about 6 months for us. So I would, in that time frame, that we would have everything ready to bring you the option.
Okay, and do we have a current appraisal on this property, Debbie?
We only did a couple appraisals. One was for some land that we were going to sell to Tisdale, Steve Tisdale. And those are 23, so they're pretty stale. We would have to redo them.
Okay. that
But what
makes
was that price an acre, though? I remember when we did those appraisals from,
I can't remember.
because I think that's what Scott Luther was basing it off, because the price per acre is what we've had.
Yeah.
And then, can we sell it or do we have to lease it? And then what's our payback to EPA if we sell versus if we lease, or versus if we donate?
Right now, if we sell it, it's 90% to EPA and 10% to the state. We can take out some operating expenses, but when I researched that, we don't have a lot of the eligible operating expenses. So basically, a sale would not yield us any cash.
So would we be able to?
Yeah,
better
so
off
that's
doing
to the
like a ground
point,
lease?
Madam Chair, we probably can't sell it.
But we could do a long-term ground lease.
Yeah.
And is that something that that process would work with, or?
We would have to work with the legal team, both with PEDC and as well as with Allison's team, to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
So is that something where we would long-term lease the property and then the investor, the buyer, the company, whoever would come in and they would build their facility with their dollars? Okay.
Yeah, we would not, government's not a great landlord.
And then Commissioner May mentioned that E-dates is not something that he would like to see for this property. How would you go about bringing in, because I know that's a huge incentive for some of your companies, how would you go about bringing in the right pieces to invest in that neighborhood without the E-dates?
So that's one of the things that we're going to bring back to you. We've already had some discussions with staff about modifying some of the measures for the E-date. You know, it was very long ago that those were established, and you can hit the maximum pretty quick. And with today's projects, we'd like to probably raise those thresholds. I'm also, not a big believer in giving 100% E-dates. So the county should be receiving funds. That's one of the purposes of economic development, is to lighten the tax load on everybody else by bringing in corporate. So we will look at making sure those E-dates have a true ROI back to the community.
Okay, and then you mentioned precision manufacturing, some warehousing. What is the average salary that you would be targeting for this property?
You know, anywhere from probably 18 to 35 an hour.
Oh.
And that would be, depending on skills, so it would fluctuate.
So Commissioner May, would your vision be to get some community input and build a master plan and then work with Florida West for the appraisal process? Or what does that look like as far as next steps for you?
Well, obviously, we want to get input. I mean, I like what Chris is saying, and Chris, thank you for your hard work. I
Oh, yes.
certainly appreciate it. So if this was a CRA, and that's why I said, I'd love to make sure that the CRA plan is intertwined, and I see our CRA people here. So I'm not looking at the CRA plan, but there is a CRA plan for this area. But, I mean, the way I see it, and CRAs may go away in this next legislative session. Who knows? But whatever the tax base is today, once we make the improvements, that's going to increase, and then we get to keep 75, 80% of that designated to that area. I think legally, I would ask the council to figure out how do those lease fees stay within that geographical area, if that's legal or if it's compliance, or to figure that out. I mean, because if we just did lease fees and it went into a general pot, I mean, the struggle of that neighborhood is real. And quite frankly, you say there are quite a few residents in that neighborhood, and it's almost been neglected for 30 years. And so, to me, if we're going to improve this site commercially and bringing industries in here, one, as you said, we need to get input, but two, we need to figure out exactly how do we do lease fees? Do we do it the same way we do it on the beach? I mean, do we keep it there? I mean, what's the governing body?
I wish we kept them on the beach. We don't keep those
Oh,
on
well,
the beach.
no, I didn't say where you kept them. I said, are we going to do it the same way? Yeah. That's not, no.
Why wouldn't we just treat it like we do all the other CRAs? 75% would go in the CRA, and then 25% would go into the general fund. I mean, that would seem logical to me. Okay.
Well, but that's for property taxes, not for leases. So I think you were saying, so if we collect $10,000 a month from leases, you want that to stay in that community.
We
Is
could
that?
wrap it, and all the lease fees could stay there. I mean, we could wrap it in. The board has the ability to wrap any of this in a special district.
Allison, is that something that we could bond future leases to go in and do those improvements to the community if we had a long-term lease on that property?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you guys have a huge blank slate here. You have a lot of options. Yes, there are a lot of ways to do that, yes.
And I guess another question, have we asked the state for any money for this? I mean, you said Representative Salzman gave some money with some time. Was that for this property because it's a Superfund site, or was that just for fire? Or is there another appropriation that we can ask the state for?
So I'm under the impression that the union lobbied her specifically for a fire training facility in Northwest Florida, and that's where that $1 million came from.
So it's not site-specific, it's just for we don't have any state money for this site, it's just for fire training.
Correct.
Well, if the union lobbied her, maybe we should hire them as our lobbyists instead of our lobbying.
One of the things too that we can do is, as we start to look at the projects, is package them and go for Triumph dollars too.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So
That would be great if we could make this a Triumph ad. Did we ever do that, Chip? Did we ever make this one of our Triumph ads? That's a brilliant idea, Chris. Now, actually, I would be real open for that, how we redevelop this and do a Triumph ads for this. And one of the things, and Chip's absolutely right, I hear what Debbie's saying, but there is an opportunity for a mixed-use opportunity here for low-income rentals. It's just simply, I spent some time back in 2012 in D.C. meeting with EPA, so I know that it's just a formality of us requesting, because much of this ground, as Chip knows, he's a scientist, was not contaminated. Quite frankly, the majority of this land was not contaminated. I mean, it's just where that cap is. There's a lot of safe land where children were eating it. Escambia Arms was there for years, and it was safe. And that ground's been tested over and over and over again. And there is opportunity where we can redevelop this and make it a model project where people can live, work, and play.
So I'm so happy that you mentioned that. The property that's adjacent to the church, is that part of the can we develop that for residential? Because there is a new state law, yes, in God's backyard, and the churches can build pretty much any affordable housing that they want. So is that property available for affordable housing that lines up with the church?
Commissioner, as Debbie said, right now, there is a restriction on all of the property, all the 100 acres. But with some additional soil testing, site-specific soil testing, at some of the outlying parcels, as Commissioner May mentioned, we could show the state and EPA that those areas do not have the soil contamination, and we could get those restrictions lifted so that residential would be allowed.
Commissioner Ray, do you think that's something the church would?
I don't know about, I wouldn't speak for the church, but I would speak for me, because with the lack of affordability, quite frankly, that's probably the closest that low-income people are going to get to the city of Pensacola. And so there is an opportunity, but we've had this conversation and you're new to it. So it's just a matter of petitioning the EPA, and I would be very open to that. You know, whether it's partnering with the church or whether it's partnering with, other CHODOs, AMI, Habitat, CII. I mean, there is an opportunity for that land to get redeveloped into some residential housing.
So I know we can't vote on anything, but we could give the directive that we move forward with the soil testing with the property adjacent to the church for those purposes. Is that something you would be interested in?
Yeah, and Chip, I believe have we tested it before? In 2012, I know when Keith was here and I went to D.C. To discuss it, there had been some testing. I don't know if it came through Senator Nelson's office or whatever, but there had been some testing of those outer areas.
You're correct. There was testing done back in the 1990s, but we would have to do more current testing to get those restrictions lifted.
Okay. It'd be good to, I mean, we have that capability in-house to test that, don't we, Chip? Or would we have to?
We can certainly do that through our water quality lab. It would take some funding, but we could certainly do it in-house a lot less than if we contracted it out.
So when you say funding, is that like 10,000 or like 100,000?
It depends on how many parcels we're talking about and how many samples.
So, I mean, actually, now you bring up a good point. I'm glad we're peeling back this onion. The number one job of us is the public safety of our citizens. We have a responsibility to test that, and so it should be tested. I mean, because it's still connected to, it's contiguous. So, it should be tested, because the reason that they purchased all the land outlying areas is because where that cap is, that was contaminated, and you just couldn't buy the contaminated area, so it went out and stretched out. And so we probably should again, at this point, since it's been so long, go ahead and test those areas to make sure there's no contamination. I'm in full support of that. I mean, that's a better discussion for us to start from here, to get it tested to see exactly where we are with it.
I can certainly get an estimate for what that would cost, and we can just do a parcel by parcel estimate.
And we want to start with the parcels that are contiguous to the church property, is that correct? That's the priority?
I'd say all the outlying areas should be tested. And if we're going to test it, let's just test them all.
Well, Commissioner May, I got to ask a question, because Chips, that was part of a class action lawsuit that went all the way down to Cross Street, right, this area? I'm pretty sure it was, because I owned a house over there. Yeah, isn't this part of that?
Man, all y'all own in my district. You, Ashley, that's good, man. I'm glad
Why
y'all
you
close
still
to
in a
the-
house over there by
I'm
O.J.
glad y'all close
Sims?
to the
and
Superfund
so-
site. That's good
I mean,
stuff.
I don't know what the request is, but I know it went down to Cross Street. So it's not right by there. It's quite a bit of ways from where that site just is. So if I'm got this right, and I'm pretty sure I do, where would we test? We wouldn't go all the way, just that site, right?
Well, it depends, I would think. We would want to minimize the testing we do because of the cost, and look at those areas where we think there may be potential residential redevelopment, so that we can get those current restrictions lifted. It would be a process, but, you know, in conversations with DEP and EPA, it is something that they've done before in other areas.
But Commissioner Kohler, in good conscience, if we remotely think that there's contamination, we should test it, no matter what
I
we
don't
put
have a
there.
problem
I
with
mean,
that.
so we shouldn't say that there's a cost, and, you know, how far do we go? We go as far as we think that contamination is. I mean, contamination is not contained to a chamber. I mean, that's the problem. You got all of Wedgewood infested. I mean, you know, because people thought we should just test here. I mean, so if it's, I mean, we should just test it. I mean, it's not going to cost, in the scope of things, it's not going to cost more than $1 million that we did on a plan at Outline Field 8 that we didn't use. I mean, I can promise you that. And it may save a life, you know, if we get it tested.
Commissioner
So-
May, if that's $1 million you're willing to give our department, we'll take it.
We'll just take it right out of Outline Field 8. We got it. Just budget it. You might not get the check, but I mean, we can assign it.
So, well, and how does the testing that you're going to do compare to like a phase one testing that you have to have for a mortgage? Because I know the Jones Flooring property, like when we bought that, we had to do the phase one testing and it passed.
Yeah, phase one testing is basically just a research to see what use has been on, historical use has been on that property, and if there are any red flags like dry cleaners or service stations that might have underground storage tanks. A phase two environmental assessment would involve testing of the soil and groundwater if there's some suspect reason why it may be contaminated.
Okay, that makes sense. So do we, Commissioner Kohler, one of the things that you mentioned was making sure that we're testing for the areas that we're looking at redevelopment, which I agree. What is you guys' thought on starting with that and starting with that price point and then expanding
My
from
point was just discussion, because we have thousands of houses on the other side of Fairfield that's already residential that got funding through a class action lawsuit. I guess that's what I'm asking. The toxic plume went all the way down into the bayou, down to Cross Street was where the class action lawsuit, everyone north of that received funds. I don't know if we need to test down there. That's a question I'm asking you. I don't know.
Yeah, Commissioner, I
Do we
think
just
you-
need to do that area? But if we're talking about toxic ground, and what Commissioner May's saying is, are we focused here, or where's that end?
Yeah, and so Mike, there's probably a foul somewhere. I mean, because if it was still contaminated, we would have labeled it a Brownsfield and probably would have gotten a federal grant to test it.
Let me try to clarify something. I think we're talking about two different things here. The class action lawsuit, Commissioner Kohler, that you're talking about, I think was the Agrico Chemical Company Superfund site, which is different. That had a groundwater plume, as you said, that extended all the way to Bayou Tahar. And that was the $70 million settlement that the Levin Papantonio law firm worked on. The Escambia Treating Company contamination is different from that.
That's, okay, thank you. I wasn't sure. That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah, right.
Because I
And,
wasn't sure.
and Mike, you know, the Conoco, what Fred, and when they did that big lawsuit, as he said, in the Bayou, which was, you know, like is it 70 or 100 million dollars. So when we had the treatment plant, which it was at the old Creel plant, it was capped. It was only so many acres. It was not as widespread. But when the federal government came in, they just bought all of the land. I mean, you had Scammy Arms, it was low income. We had all that stuff down Pearl Street. We had all those things off of Palafox. And so there was a big outcry. So it was environmental and it was social in the acquisition of those properties. So it was not all just contamination on the environment. It was the displacement and the things that happened when they had to relocate that plant.
So if I'm looking at Debbie's map that's up on the screen correctly, the green box in the bottom right-hand corner, there's essentially three different parcels there. The bottom one the middle one would be the one adjacent to the church.
So what we were showing was this, but it was just to show an acre, or now 3.
Okay, so I guess Commissioner May, just to clarify. Well, I guess I'm asking, do you want to dedicate these green spaces to the probability of affordable housing and then look at dedicating the northern part to Florida West so they can provide jobs for those housing? So I guess we start with the testing as far as the southern pieces, and then we would present that to FDEP. And then in the meantime, Chris, you would need appraisals, and then Commissioner May, are you wanting a master plan for the northern part? What's next steps for you, Chris?
And I think Chris wants to master plan it, and he'll have to go.
And when we say master plan, it's pretty light. It's just really to utilize, how do we utilize the land the most? We're not looking for a very expensive master plan.
So this is something Florida West can run with. You don't need us to do that.
I think we're good to do that with PEDC.
And Madam Chair, I think we're going to have a fly-in next month to NACO, and I plan to go to EPA. If you go into the EPA office in D.C., this is one of the model projects, and it's information overload as it relates to this. I mean, when you say that this is the third largest relocation in the history of the United States, that's pretty huge in the amount of money. So, I mean, there's a keen interest that the federal government has on this project. And I know it was a number one priority of Senator Nelson when he was in office. I have not ever spoken to Senator Scott about it, but I know that this is important. And, I think that my office can reach out, I'll get with CHIPS. We can reach out and get all the historical data on this and bring it forward.
Okay, and I would love to support in any way that we can as far as the affordable housing aspect and working with the nonprofits that you mentioned earlier. Chris, what do you need from our board to move forward with the appraisals and the planning and the leases?
We'd like for you to get the appraisal, if you could. But the other planning we can do, just as long as we have the understanding that, you guys go with that.
Is that something the board?
Yeah, tonight, Debbie, can we start with the old appraisals with that land? I mean, because what we did was because it's going to be so expensive, and those companies that express interest, Pensacola Glass, Gilmore, Emerald Coast Granite, who's the electrical company? What was his name?
Tisdale and
Tisdale and
Spares has on and off expressed
Spares.
some interest.
And so we did do appraisals of those properties in partnership with Florida West before our current director here. We did that with Scott Lou. So I think it'd be great to pull those out and dust them off and share them with us, even though they're old. It gives us a starting point of what at least we can anticipate per acre or what it's going to be worth.
Okay.
And how does the appraisal work for the capped site? Is there certain appraisal companies that we can use for that? Because that seems like a very specific thing to put a dollar amount on for a lease.
Well, most appraisers are familiar with how the discount for environmental issues and what it can and can't be used for. It can be used, so it's just what's the expense going to be to someone and what's the loss of value because it's going to cost more to develop it. But most appraisers are familiar with that.
And is that something that we have on record, or that would be something that we would need to go and have somebody complete for us?
I'd have to talk to the appraiser to see how much. We can also, I think, based on everything else that we do, we can also have our engineering department to look at it, or facilities, and give us some estimates of what we think it would be worth.
And see, when you go get, wow, and there was light. So, Madam Chair.
Now you can see my
Yeah, well, it's very pretty.
Thank you.
I guess fortunate or unfortunate, Senator Nelson was very, very environmentally sensitive, and so am I. But many of the environmental restrictions, as we know, are being lifted each and every day by this current administration. You know, restrictions that were once in place for the development of land, redeveloped land, those, it's every day, EPA at the federal level is kind of relaxing its rules. Doing appraisals without knowing whether or not it's contaminated would be, you know, worthless, because we came back after we tested it and it was good, clean land. There's a big difference from it being clean versus not being clean. So you got to test it first and then do the appraisals and do in line with the restrictions, because there are just a ton of restrictions that have been lifted. I mean, it's every day that there's a federal regulation that's being changed. And so I think, you know, whether we get our lobbyists to look into it or our staff or Debbie, we need to look exactly where we are with EPA, because many of the things that was under the Obama and Biden administration and Senator Nelson is completely different than what's under this current administration. So we may be in a better shape. I mean, particularly in terms of restrictions.
That would make sense. So I guess bring us a price point back for all of the testing. And then I would just like some detail on how the capped part is discounted, more or less. And I think Chris is going to need that in the future as far as doing the leases.
Commissioner, just talking about the capped area, which would be the most challenging to build on. Just very simply, the cap that separates the contaminated groundwater from the clean fill material on top of the rubber membrane cannot be pierced. And so 6 feet is sort of the magic number that any piling or any subsurface structure could go without penetrating that cap. So anything that's built on a slab would you know, be easy to construct. If there's any pilings, they just cannot penetrate more than 6 feet.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's parts of the property that we know are contaminated that are not worth sampling, more or less? And you guys would know where those are? Yes. Horace is saying yes. Okay, that makes sense.
So, Chip, probably, or maybe Horace is a witness. I know that when Keith went over to the city, they were trying to buy, and I spoke with the mayor briefly about some inland port stuff that he's trying to do. But we may check with the city. I mean, I know they did some testing, some surveying, and some appraisals when they were trying to acquire the land, when Keith first went over with former Mayor Robinson. So I'm sure that they have a file over, particularly on the parcels that the city had at one time. Because we got those parcels back within the county that the city had, correct?
That's correct. We're actually meeting with the city on Monday for another issue, so we'll certainly ask them about that information.
Okay. All right. And I would think that somewhere in our CRA office, in that Palafox redevelopment plan, that they would be able to gather that information too, because the CRAs were involved in the parcels of the redevelopment that we were going to do on there from the city. And I think we just couldn't come to an agreement on price is the reason we didn't give that to the city, or sell it to the city. And I think, if my memory recalls, just because then that's what happened, is that, you know, we couldn't sell, you had to lease, and so it became a little muddy, and then it just all got dead in the water.
That
So
makes
I think
sense.
there's some good information that we can go, but conceptually, Chris, Madam Chair, I'm ready to rock and roll with economic development, job creation, and redevelopment of that neighborhood, which was promised to that community.
And I think Commissioner May is right. It's important that we move forward with those jobs and that we provide the people who live around there a good place to live, work, and play. So just so I understand, our goal is for the southern parcels in the green, for us to look at testing those and possibly dropping the restrictions for low-income housing. And then the parcels that are indicated in the orange, to work with Debbie to get the best dollar that we can for long-term leases, and then work to get Triumph funding for infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm cool. I mean, and actually, all the way up to your Washington that comes there, and I'm sure you have a lot of walking traffic. That even walking up to the back door of where your building is now was considered all a part of this. I mean, all the way from Pace Boulevard and Cowtown, all the way back down to Palafox. And so that's why I say it's important to make sure that we do the testing, because, you know, there's a lot of infill housing, and if there's some contamination, we said we had a huge lawsuit. But now we're having this discussion, and if we are aware that there's contamination, we have the responsibility. I mean, and so there's always, you know, in my district, there's always people who live there who still think that it's contaminated. And quite frankly, you know, it's just what they've read and what they've heard, because, you know, I was there on the ground. Just where that cap was really where the contamination was, as Chip said. So, thank you.
So as far as like the next steps moving forward, the bottom half, we're looking to drop the restrictions if we can through testing and move towards affordable housing. And then the top half, the portion highlighted in orange, we're looking to move forward, working with Florida West, getting the appraisals done and doing job creation. Is that?
And let Chris move forward with a development plan for a mixed use. I mean, it can be, you know, our outline Field 8 right in the city of Pensacola. I would say, Chris, the mayor has, and I don't want to, you know, speak out of turn with him, but I know that they're working on a huge project with, from what I understand, 2,000 jobs. And I would, hopefully, when we come back with the plan that we've looked at talking with the city in terms of if those are real or what companies they're working with. I don't want to, you know, have a public discussion about it because I'm sure it's all confidential, but if you would include me, I'd certainly appreciate it. And I think I'm going to meet with the mayor myself on next week.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to clarify. So at the moment, the fire training facility is on hold for this location anyway, but may we proceed with the knowledge, we can use the animal shelter, the 5 acres for the animal shelter?
I think he comes back, let him lay it all out and bring it back to us with whatever.
Okay.
I mean, with what we've said in mind, that, you know, it's not going to be all non-Avalon producing. And as Commissioner Berry said, we can wrap lease fees and anticipated income, just kind of with not just, you know, a picture, but a concept picture with, you know, some real goals, objectives, parameters, guidelines, and plans that's inclusive of that CRA of how it's developed. And I think that makes sense. To me, if you're looking for the model, what it says, simply what's been presented every time on Outline Field 8.
Okay.
And then as far as getting a cost analysis for doing the testing, what does that look like?
We'll come back to you with a price per parcel for the soil and groundwater testing. And then, you know, how many ever parcels you want to do, we can just multiply that out.
Okay, and so we would be able to prioritize those based on the cost per testing. Could we have that by the January 22nd meeting so we could do that as a discussion item?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner May, anything else?
Chip, do you think that you'll be able to get all the files and all the information from EPA by the January meeting? And I just don't want to put too much on you. I mean, because I know I will not have gone to DC by the January meeting. I think our fly-in is in February, but I just want to make sure we have everything, all the information from the city and from the EPA and the whole file. So just give yourself enough time.
In any testing that was done more than a few years ago is not going to be acceptable to EPA or DEP because of wind-blown activities and natural attenuation and many other factors. So we're going to have to do new sampling for all those sites.
Okay, sounds great.
How long would the turnaround be on that? I'm sorry. Because if Commissioner May has it in hand when he goes to Washington, maybe that's a better ask for him to say, hey, we need dollars for this, this, and this is what our soil results say.
Yeah.
How long does that take?
Well, we can have you the dollar estimate by the meeting on the 22nd.
Okay.
Yep.
It would just be an ask when I'm in DC for money. I think you and Commissioner Kohler would have a much better chance of getting money out of Washington than I would.
I
But
don't leave
will-
Escambia. I'm staying home.
My concern to me with EPA is to look at the master plan and look at the contamination. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get any more federal money, but that's something that we could give to our lobbyists, and we could give it to
It doesn't hurt to ask.
yeah, we could get our Tallahassee lobbyists to look at it as well,
Yeah.
and to our delegation. Because, I mean, it's going to be a heavy lift for the infrastructure and the superstructure to get this done. I mean, it's, as Chris said, it's going to be a triumph ass or a heavy lift just to get the infrastructure inside of here. for the
So was
road.
this an actual brownfield or no? Was it has it
It
been?
has to be labeled a brownfield. It was contaminated.
And so there are grants for revitalizing those areas.
Have we
correct?
gotten a brownfield grant for this, Chip, Claire? Have we gotten a brownfield grant for this? Have we applied for one? Oh, they got rid of, there's no more?
I don't
No, there's probably no money now. I guarantee there's no money for brownfield now. I mean, it used to be money. Yeah.
There certainly could be some tax incentives for redevelopment under the Brownsville program.
Did they take all the brownfield money? Have they stripped that money? Or is there still
It's
brownfield
still available.
still available?
There's that.
Chip?
Chips, there's grants. I thought the funds were gone. There's grants or there's just tax incentives? Or you're avoiding payments in the future or there's cash?
With the Brownfields program, I think it's both. I think there is some cash, but I think mainly it's tax advantages based on the number of jobs you create.
Chips, can you bring, I mean, that's a good point, Madam Chair. Can you bring that back? I mean, where those grants are, the incentives and those type of things? Because, you know, when I say no tax abatement, I know we're going to have to incentivize businesses to want to come in that area. So there's opportunity that you can bring that back. I mean, that helps give us justification of why we're going to do these appraisals and testing and all that. So if there's something that you can work with Chris and bring that back, that would be great.
Yes, sir.
And Steve, I thought it was all gone too. I didn't know it was still available.
All right. Our next Cal meeting is going to be on ECAT unless that is something that is no longer needed.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I see Mike stepped out, but before we break this morning, and I don't care that we do it as a Cal or just put it on as a discussion item for a board meeting, the dealing with customary use on Perdita Key is, it's going to have to be dealt with by this board. I mean, I tried to softly, you know, intimate that in November or whenever we talked about it most recently, but it's, in my opinion, it's not going to go away. You now have some of your District 4 advocates that have taken up the mantra. Commissioner May and I have sat through hundreds of hours of public comments and meetings related to the beach stuff 6 or 7 years ago. And in my opinion, our board is going to need to take some action. I don't know that it has to be, you know, a 3-hour discussion by us. I mean, there's two directions the board could take. I mean, either we take an action or we don't take an action, and then just let the chips fall where they may after that. But I would, you know, if there's at least a few of us that want to avoid 2026 of every single meeting addressing that, I think that's the only way that we're going to do that.
Do you want to add that to the January 22nd as a discussion item? I think if we add it tonight, it's not enough communities to
Madam
notice.
Chair, I walked out for a second, but I agree with Commissioner Berry. We're all getting the emails. I think we have a responsibility to listen to the people and try to come up with solutions. But I think we need to have a Cal on it, honestly, is my suggestion, but
Let's put it in February then, and put ECAT off a month.
are you okay with that, Madam Chair? What is the February
So
Cal?
the February meeting was based around ECAT, but I know we have a few agenda items for ECAT tonight, and there's been some changes with the ITL, so I don't know if that was my question, is that still relevant, or do
Can we
we?
change the,
That's gonna be a discussion, I mean, but there'll be a discussion about ECAT, but I can yield,
to do customary use?
do customary use.
Are you all right with that, Madam Chair?
Yes,
Then
absolutely.
let's do it in February.
All right, that's fine.
I think
just-
it'll slow down what he's saying, because I'm getting it every day.
Yeah, and I'm getting to it, but Commissioner, I mean, at the end of the day, those citizens are going to have input. So at the committee of the whole, they're not going to be able to speak. And so what Commissioner Berry is saying, that you put it on as a discussion, because those citizens, regardless, are going to want to give their input. So we can have a committee of the whole, but we're going to have to add it to the agenda. And
Well,
you're gonna
maybe the
have those
second
citizens-
meeting in February, we could do that after we have some.
Okay, that's fine, whatever, but I was just saying too, in line with what Commissioner Berry is saying,
I-
regardless, it's gonna be a lot of input, so we can do committee of whole, and we can discuss it and then have it, or we can have it as a discussion and have those citizens come and speak, because it's gonna be, there's a lot of
I'm
passion.
open, but I agree, something's got to give.
So I do agree with Commissioner May, because I can see the hate mail now. You guys did this as a committee of a whole, and we missed the discussion, and you didn't get our input. And they would not be wrong. So with that, are we?
I'm open to whatever y'all
I
want.
think you're going to get a lot of discussion tonight, so.
You're gonna get it every night until you do something about it.
Right, and
I mean, there'll be a lot of people here tonight.
Commissioner May and I have, the one, one specific group, again, not solely of District 4 constituents, but that advocated for beach issues, some number of years ago. And, Commissioner Robinson was, we were slow to, or perceived slow to be doing something. And it can really, I mean, let's address it and let's do something. So it'll make everybody's year better, no matter what the outcomes are.
So, are there any legal restrictions we have? Is it just a legal issue or just a policy? I'm sorry.
Is there legal issues that we're, with this customary use, or is it just policy issues that we need to serve as a board, or are there some legal
I also want to
things?
note Commissioner Stroberger's not here, so I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm a little.
That's true.
It's his district, but
So I think the reason that this is, in the last 6 months or so, become such a big issue is that, based on Governor DeSantis's initiative, the statutory presumption regarding customary use has now been amended back to its pre-2018 in favor of the public. The statutory presumption for about 7 or 8 years was changed, and it was swayed in favor of the private owners. It's now statutorily, the presumption is back in favor of the public, but still, if there is to be a declaration of customary use in favor of the public, my opinion is this board would need to declare that and would have to declare exactly the geographical area that you're declaring that over by ordinance. And that would need a vote of this board for sure. And it needs to be based on the historical, factual, evidentiary record of customary recreational use by the public, which is your old-fashioned, old-school things like photographs of people in the old-fashioned bathing suits from 1903, and it's probably also things where your environmental department can show where public resources were used to protect certain beach properties, BP oil spill, hurricanes, berms, I mean, all these kinds of things factually with witnesses, with documentary evidence, not just, well, I always used to go out there. It needs to be very specific evidentiary record. But this board would need to declare it by specific geography and by ordinance. And this is really not a Pensacola Beach issue, because the way the leases are
totally different.
described on Pensacola Beach, 95% of the leases on Pensacola Beach end at the vegetative line, and the sandy strip of the beach on 95% of those parcels on Pensacola Beach are already owned and controlled by the public.
Yeah, Madam Counsel, I wasn't inferring it had anything to do with the legislative issue on Pensacola Beach. You have a common advocacy now, was my point.
Oh, yeah,
That's
100%,
okay,
yes.
That's my.
There
that's
is a group that is interested in beach access regardless of which barrier island or whatever, 100%.
Madam Chair, but with her saying that, I guess I would change, I'm sorry.
I know Commissioner Coles, I guess I would change my mind. I didn't realize it was that deep, and we got to have all this evidentiary information and pictures, and, I mean, that's going to be a lot of staff time. I mean,
So
A
is
lot of
that
that's gonna
something
be-
we-
I mean,
My-
that's
my-
what you put on the people that honestly, I mean, you have people that are advocating for us to take this position.
My point
Some
is
of-
just if it's challenged.
Yeah, some of that information is going to have to come from them. Our board can take action. The exhibits and witnesses, those don't have to come to us for us.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the eventual litigation, which would probably be inevitable, but, okay, that's part of municipal government, is litigation, so, I mean, those.
They go to court and litigate.
Yeah, there's going to be witnesses, there's going to be all that. Our board can take action. I mean, you would like to think that, municipal bodies throughout the state always take, well-informed and well-intended actions and have maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, but, you know, our board only has to have so much information to take action. You know, we define an area, we say that it's historically, we say that it's historically been used to, you know, by the public. That's our action. And then the rest of it, it'll be fought somewhere in some time frame that probably extends a long time, but that's, again, you know, not.
So you anticipate, Commissioner Berry, that you anticipate that it'll probably end up in litigation no matter what decision? I mean, Allison's nodding yes.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I mean, I think that it is highly likely. We were challenged over the easement, and the easement appeared on a plat. So, I mean, I would anticipate that private property owners, and you really should have some basis for your legislative findings of the area that you're defining. So we do need to have some reasons why we're declaring that there is and there was a historic recreational use of the properties. But yeah, I mean, I would anticipate that some of those folks are very unhappy about the idea.
I appreciate it. I agree with you, Madam Chair, that this Commissioner Strobel is a district, at least in given time to go meet with his residents. I mean, to have community, I don't know if he's at a town hall or whatever, but he should be.
So do we want to do it, because what we could do, is staff going to need to present to us on this? Because I know I have questions. I think all of us are going to have legal questions on that. Is there going to be a presentation from staff, or is this mostly community presentations?
I think that's a question for the board.
Well, that's where my question was going with the cow. So I just want to clarify, Madam Attorney, the way I understood it when we talked yesterday is that the board would, when you say geographical area, are you saying if we decided to do customary use at some extent, we would have to go plat by plat in that definition?
No, forget the plats. The plat issue is related to the 75-foot wide easement, which is across 1.2 miles of the Gulf front of Perdido Key. That was involved in litigation last year. So far to date, I mean, those lawsuits were dismissed. The county, in my opinion, successfully was able to demonstrate that the plats do memorialize that 75-foot wide easement. In my opinion, it exists today. It's enforceable today. So that 1.2 miles of Perdido Key does have a 75-foot wide easement that is open to the public. So that's a different issue that exists, that is there. If the county commission makes legislative findings by ordinance that there is a historic recreational customary use of certain parcels of the sandy strip of the beach, regardless of 75 feet. That's not the issue. The issue is basically between your vegetative line and your mean high water line. The sandy strip of the beach, was it recreationally used historically by the public? You need to declare what that area is and declare by ordinance that there is a historic customary use that shall remain in place in favor of the public. The change in the law statutorily helps you because now it is swayed back in favor of that public customary use, but it still might have to be demonstrated in court if it's challenged by the private owners who are unhappy potentially about it. There are places in the state where they're very used to the public using the beaches and they don't challenge it. And there are places where private owners, the upland private owners, are very unhappy about it. So if the upland owner is very unhappy about that use, they may challenge it. And then it comes down to the real nitty-gritty ability to demonstrate with evidence that that is a historic customary use of that sandy strip of the beach.
Well, I guess from my perspective, I know Commissioner Stroberger's not here, but I would like you guys to come up with some schematics to show us some recommendations, Chips and Tim, of what would be, reasonable recommendation for the board to vote on. I mean, I think we ought to have a staff recommendation of some sort. Is that something you guys could potentially send to us before, or that's what I was thinking on a cow. I don't know where we're going to land, but that's kind of where I was going.
So do we want to,
Be out there when Stroberger has his
Yeah.
town hall meeting.
I agree. I mean, staff should go out to him when he has his town halls and come back with something that fits. I mean, you know, I hate all the litigation. I mean, it's.
I don't want any
I
litigation.
mean, as Commissioner Berry says, it's probably inevitable. But, I mean, Allison, do we have a precedent saying, you know, this holds up in court, or is it no real parameters or precedent? I mean,
So there was so I think the customary use statutory presumption in favor of the public went into place in the very, very early 70s or late 60s. And from then until like the until around 2018, there were very, very few cases, because I would say there was essentially an acquiescence that the beaches were for the public. There was a philosophical understanding.
not really in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't from the public.
Perhaps a different issue.
Yeah.
But I think that generally the private versus public sandy strip of the beach issue in most places there was very little litigation from the outset on the customary use statute. Very little until the 2018 statutory change. There has been a significant amount of litigation, I believe, between 2018 and last year, because basically that statutory presumption swayed the other direction, and there were a lot of public access groups very unhappy, and so there was, I think, a significant amount. I'm not anticipating necessarily that there's going to be a lot now. It's going back to the way the statutory change is putting it back to the way it was for 50 years, when there was very little. I personally don't know of another county at this moment. I've asked. I haven't found another county yet that is engaging in this process. There might be some smaller incorporated areas that are taking this on. I haven't found one yet, but I have heard just anecdotally that some municipalities are looking into the idea, smaller beachfront communities maybe. So there's not, I don't know of a lot of recent precedent yet.
And was it Okaloosa County or Fort Walton Beach?
Walton.
Okay, and they've been in litigation for how long?
Yeah, the Walton County situation is, in my opinion, unfortunate in that it has been a very expensive and long-standing issue, and frankly, I don't know enough about the workings in Tallahassee, but I think maybe was a part of the statutory change back in 2018. They have engaged in this battle, and certainly is one of the folks I'll reach out to is the current Walton County representation to kind of get a feel for that. It has literally gone up to the U.S. Supreme Court and back down in Walton County, and they have now survived two changes in the change in the statute as well. So I'll get an update on their situation, but yeah, I don't know that that's 100% resolved, but yeah, that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
So do we want this to be a COW or a discussion item? I lean more towards discussion item because I know the community is going to want their input.
Well, I think both. Yeah,
So
I
do
think
we
you have
wanna
an
do-
informational brief first, so
Okay.
that we have all the knowledge, historical knowledge. And then, obviously, these folks are going to keep coming and talking to the board, and then we have a discussion item at a follow-up meeting.
We'll do the COW, the February COW on customary use, and then that evening we'll have a discussion item.
Or the next meeting. The next meeting, give
following
there a little
meeting.
bit of decision space.
Okay, so the following meeting, we'll have that as a discussion item.
I think that'd be good.
We're going to bring it for a discussion. I mean, I'd like to have it for a discussion item and an action item, because at some point, we're going to have to make a vote. We can take action?
Yeah, we can take action on
Okay.
it. I think, but I also think after we have the COW, there'll be a little bit of time in my opinion, there's always good to have a little bit of decision space to make sure we're making the right decision.
Okay, so the next COW will be on customary use, and then not the meeting that night, but the following meeting, we will have a discussion item and an action item on customary use? Okay. Hassan, can you relay that to Commissioner Stroberger? Okay, oh, great. Okay, anything else before we adjourn? No? Wonderful, Cal. Thank you, everyone.